Ash drifted like dead snow across the crumbling skyline of Sector 9. Neon signs flickered uncertainly in the haze. Pale imitations of city that once gleamed with ambition. Now, metal skeletons of bombed-out towers loomed over the streets like mourning gods. Among them moved Kael, silent and unnoticed, just another shadow slipping through the ruin. She kept her head low, her drawn-up face smudged with grease and dust. No one paid her attention. Not the merchants screaming about stale ration bars. Not the factory guards shoving a crying boy into a transport. Not even a gang of street rats who usually found sport in mocking loners. Kael had perfected the art of invisibility. She preferred it that way. In the underground tech market, where scavenged components were traded like currency, Kael lingered near a busted fusion core display, her fingers twitching with the urge to fix it. The vendor, a balding man with mechanical limbs, noticed her glance and waved her off. "Beat it, rat. You can't afford to look." She obeyed without a word, not because she was afraid, but because silence made forgetting easier. If people didn't remember her, they couldn't question her. And if they didn't question her, they wouldn't find out what she really was. The truth was buried, like most things in Sector 9. Later, tucked into the crevice between two collapsed buildings, Kael sat with her knees drawn to her chest. Her fingers danced across the remains of a busted drone, soldering wires with a handheld arc torch she'd built from scraps. She worked fast, efficient. Every action had purpose. Every breath was measured. Her mind wasn't on the drone, though. She was thinking about the incident 2 nights ago, the scream that echoed from a nearby alley, the glowing red eyes of the patrol mech that cornered a woman against a wall. Kael had watched, unseen from above, as the mech raised its arm, and then it malfunctioned, violently. Circuits had erupted in sparks, and the towering metal beast collapsed in a twitching heap. The woman had fled in terror, never seeing the shadow that leapt from the roof and vanished into the dark. Kael hadn't hesitated. She never did. But that night had left a ripple. People whispered about it now. The ghost combatant. An urban myth. A glitch. A rebel weapon. Kael said nothing. She kept her head down and disappeared further. Back in the sector square, an explosion rattled the cracked pavement. She flinched only slightly. Another skirmish. The corporate enforcers were growing restless. Ever since the resistance took down a supply convoy outside the dome walls. Now, every poor district was being purged. She could feel it coming. Pressure, like a storm tightening around her ribs. "Hey, you deaf?" Kael looked up. A heavy-set girl with a cruel smile and corporate-issue boots loomed over her. Jace, one of the local bullies. She worked with the dome engineers, but like reminding others, she still ruled these streets. Kael didn't answer. "You always staring like you're somewhere else," Jace sneered, shoving her shoulder. "Bet you think you're better than us. Think you're smart." "No," Kael said quietly. "Then act like it." Another shove. A circuit board clattered from Kael's satchel onto the concrete. Jace reached for it, but Kael's hand darted out. Faster than instinct, smoother than thought. She caught it midair before it hit the ground. For a heartbeat, Jace stared. Then she laughed. Reflexes like a rat. "You belong in the tunnels." Kael said nothing. She waited until the girl turned and left, then rose slowly, clutching the salvage tech close. The damage was superficial. Easy fix. But her pulse was too fast, her hands too tight. That reflex had been too clean. She needed to be more careful. Night came fast in Sector 9. Faster still when the smog choked out the light. Kael slipped into a crevice behind the old train station, where steam hissed through fractured pipes and the ground was warm with leaking energy. Her shelter was modest, just a sheet of scrap metal prop between walls. A heat coil hidden beneath her bedroll. She placed the drone on her lap, but didn't power it up. Instead, she pulled a small disc from a hidden pouch around her neck. It was scorched and cracked, ancient by current tech standards. But when she inserted it into her makeshift player, a hologram flickered to life. A man's face appeared, rough, weathered, and scarred. His voice was calm. "If you're seeing this, it means I didn't make it out. That's fine. You know what to do, Kael." She closed her eyes, letting the voice anchor her. You're smarter than they know, stronger than they'll believe. But strength is only useful when you choose where to aim it. Survive first, then strike. The recording ended. Kael remained still for a long time. Outside, sirens echoed. Heavy footfalls followed. Enforcer units, sweeping for suspected collaborators. She tightened her gloves and reached beneath her bedroll, pulling out a cloth-wrapped bundle. Inside, a collapsible carbon staff, shock blade, EMP knives. All scavenged, all modified, all illegal. The tools of someone who should not exist. Kael tucked them away again, let them keep believing she was weak, that she was nothing. It gave her space. Time. But deep down, she knew that time was running out. The next morning, she woke to shouting. 2 enforcers had cornered a man near the market, a trader named Bren, who sometimes gave Kael old processors in exchange for spare wire. He wasn't a rebel, just poor. But today, that was enough. The crowd parted like water, eyes down. No one interfered. Kael did nothing. She told herself she couldn't risk it. Not in daylight, not in the open. But her fingers flexed unconsciously. She felt the weight of the knife strapped to her thigh. Bren cried out as he was dragged to the pavement. A boot crushed his ribs. The enforcers laughed. Then something snapped. Not in Kael, in the mech behind them. It twitched, only for a second. A flash of orange light blinked beneath its chest plate. Kael's eyes widened. A software flaw. She'd seen that before, or caused it, before she realized it. Her body was moving, not toward them, but away, fast, blending into the crowd, slipping between carts and scaffolds, ducking into an alley. Her mind raced. That mech was one of the newer models. Its override firewall shouldn't have failed, unless someone bypassed it. Someone like her. From the shadows, she watched as the enforcers cursed and struggled to reboot their asset. Bren was forgotten. He crawled away, bloody but alive. The mech stood frozen, locked in diagnostic mode. Kael exhaled. She had done nothing. Not directly. But something was stirring. An echo of her code? A resonance from her old hacks? She didn't know. She only knew it was getting harder to stay hidden. As the crowd dispersed and the market returned to its brutal rhythm, Kael looked at the horizon, where the dome lights pulsed like an indifferent eye. No one knew who she was. They saw a weak girl with dirt on her cheeks and empty pockets. But the city was shifting, and soon someone would look too closely and find out. The tunnel stretched beneath the sector like a buried vein, pulsing with faint blue light from exposed fiber conduits. Kael moved through it with silent purpose, her boots barely scuffing the damp floor. The echoes of her movements vanished behind her like smoke. She knew these paths, every flickering light, every rusted panel. This was the old grid, forgotten infrastructure beneath the city, invisible to corporations and perfect for someone who didn't want to be found. She reached a hatch sealed with a biometric lock. Her fingers brushed the panel, and a faint spark jumped from her skin. The lock clicked open without a sound. Inside, a space no wider than a supply closet bloomed into organized chaos. Tools suspended on magnetic walls, repurposed hollow screens streaming intercepted security feeds, and a half-assembled mech limb rigged with Kael's own circuitry. This was where the weak girl disappeared, and the engineer, the fighter, was reborn. She shrugged off her coat and rolled up her sleeves. Blood from a shallow cut dried along her forearm, residue from the earlier street chaos. With precise movements, she cleaned it, then turned her attention to the workbench. The damage droned from the day before blinked to life under her fingers. In minutes, she corrected its corrupted AI core and embedded a stealth mod it was never meant to carry. "Almost done," she murmured, more to herself in the machine. A tone chirped from the far wall. She froze. Someone had triggered her proximity alert. Kael killed the lights, drawing her shock blade instinctively. The screen flared with a grainy figure approaching the tunnel, alone cloaked. She recognized the walk before the face emerged from the shadows. Aaron. He ducked through the entrance like he belonged there, which he didn't. His blonde hair was disheveled, jacket torn at the shoulder, and his eyes carried the familiar glint of someone running out of choices. Do you have any idea what kind of signal this place gives off when you're sloppy? Kael said, blade still half-drawn. I wasn't followed, he said, raising his hands. You sure? I'm still alive, aren't I? Kael narrowed her eyes, but lowered the blade. Aaron wasn't a threat, yet, but he was a risk. Always had been. The last time he showed up, he'd stolen a data shard from a patrol ship and nearly brought half a unit down on her hideout. He sank into the nearest crate, wincing. You heard what happened in Sector 5? I hear a lot of things. They executed 2 smugglers. Publicly. They do that when they want people afraid. They're succeeding. His voice dropped. People are whispering about a ghost, taking down mechs, vanishing into thin air. You wouldn't happen to know anything about that, would you? Kael kept her face unreadable. Look, Aaron said, leaning forward. You're better than hiding in a sewer, Kael. We need you. The Resistance needs you. There is no resistance, she replied coolly. Just desperate people getting themselves killed. That's not true. Dina's alive. She's leading a group across the canal line. With your skills. I'm not interested. You were once. Kael's jaw tightened. That was before. Aaron didn't push. Smart. He leaned back and scanned the room, noting the drone, the modified tech, the lines of code flickering on the walls. They say whoever's behind these attacks must be ex-military. Maybe a defector from the mech squads. People say a lot of things. He hesitated. I don't think you're hiding just to survive. I think you're waiting. Kael turned away. That struck too close. When Aaron finally left, she resealed the hatch and sat alone in the dim glow of her workstation. The drone hovered beside her now, perfectly silent, its sensors recalibrating. She uploaded a new command protocol, encrypted and untraceable. The Resistance was reckless, loud. She wasn't their symbol. She was the one who dismantled systems from the inside, one corrupted line of code at a time. Her war was not about glory. It was about precision. She didn't want people to follow her. She wanted the enemy to fall without knowing who pushed. Still, Aaron's words lingered. She hadn't always been this alone. The memory of her mentor, Torin, flared like an old wound. He'd taught her how to disassemble a mech blindfolded, how to break a soldier's stance with a flick of her wrist, how to turn fear into silence. But silence hadn't saved him. Kael closed her eyes, hearing his last words from the training sim. When they underestimate you, that's when you strike. A chime pulled her back. An alert on the Eastern Network node. Unusual activity near one of the corporate repair stations. Patrol units were converging. She tapped into the feed. A resistance team. Sloppy. Loud. Idiots. Her fingers moved before she thought. She sent the drone into deployment mode, patched into its vision and charted a route. She wasn't doing this for them. She was doing it to protect the tunnels, the safe paths she couldn't afford to lose. As the drone flew out of the hidden tunnel vent, Kael slid into her gear, dark armor rigged with reflex enhancers, camo cloak integrated into the fabric. She became someone else, someone whose name was never written in records, whose existence was denied even by allies. Minutes later, she was on the roof of a derelict factory overlooking the chaos. 3 enforcer units, 1 active mech. For resistance fighters pinned down behind a barrier of scrap. They were about to be vaporized. Kael leapt across the rooftop, knees absorbing the shock. She moved with the practiced ease of muscle memory, using shadows as allies. Her fingers gripped the magnetic edges of a maintenance rail as she scaled the mech's blind side. The drone hovered above, transmitting its perspective directly to her lens. She reached the control port beneath the mech's shoulder plating and slid a blade between the armor plates. A twist, a spark, a sudden whine of corrupted circuitry. The mech staggered. From below, one of the resistance fighters looked up in confusion. Kael didn't wait. She activated a pulse burst from her glove, frying the unit's stabilizers. The mech fell to one knee, its targeting systems locked into reboot. Shots rang out. One of the enforcers screamed. By the time the resistance crew realized what had happened, their attackers were either dead or disabled. They looked around, searching for their mysterious savior. Kael was already gone. Back underground, she shed the gear and re-entered the role of the invisible girl. The drone returned unharmed. She patched the data feed, analyzed the attack, logged the mech's updated vulnerabilities. Everything had a purpose. But tonight, something had changed. She'd been seen. Not clearly, but enough. One of the fighters had caught a glimpse of her silhouette. Tomorrow, the rumors would grow. And soon, hiding wouldn't be enough. Kael stared at her reflection. In the cracked screen, dirt on her face, grease in her hair. A girl no one noticed. A ghost. But ghosts couldn't hide forever. The storm rolled in without warning, fast, electric, and furious. Rain slammed down like bullets, turning the streets into jagged rivers of neon reflection. Kael crouched on a rooftop, hood drawn low, eyes fixed on the transit hub below. Her breath came slow and steady, even as the wind threatened to tear the air from her lungs. She was waiting, and the storm was the perfect cover. Below, the corporate shuttle blinked into the station, sleek and armored, like a predator among prey. A dozen guards disembarked in formation, followed by a man in a dark overcoat. Director Marek, her fingers curled into fists. He was the architect of the new patrol algorithms, the mind behind the facial recognition systems that had made life in the outer sectors unbearable. Every drone, every mech, every checkpoint, they all bore his digital signature. He walked with the confidence of someone untouchable, flanked by guards who knew they were invincible. Kael had studied him for weeks. This wasn't just a chance to disrupt their supply chain. This was an opportunity to rip a hole in the system. But timing was everything. Movement to her left caught her eye, a shape in the shadows. She tensed, but relaxed a heartbeat later. It was Sora. The younger girl moved with less grace, but with a quiet resolve that Kael had grown to respect. They'd crossed paths 3 times in the past month, each time under fire, and each time Sora had proven she could keep up without asking questions. That made her useful. Zone's clean. No patrol sweeps in the next 10 minutes, Sora whispered, crouching beside her. Kael nodded. We take the North Ridge. Wait for him to enter the access bay. You sure about this? Sora asked, not out of fear, but calculation. I've never been more sure. They moved together, gliding across the rooftops, slipping between security nodes like ghosts in the circuitry. The access bay loomed ahead, its entrance shrouded in mist and humming energy fields. Guards clustered near the perimeter but kept their eyes outwards, never above. Kael dropped down silently behind a turbine vent. Her fingers danced over the terminal, slicing into the gate's internal system. She looped the security feed with a 5-second delay, enough to mask their entry. Now, she said. They slipped inside, hugging the walls. The bay was quiet, save for the hum of machinery and the dull thrum of the shuttle's idle core. Marek's voice echoed faintly from the adjoining room, discussing new enforcement protocols, asset deployment, talking about people like they were inventory. Kael slipped closer into the adjacent chamber. The lights were low, flickering under the strain of the storm. Her target stood at the hollow console, issuing commands to unseen subordinates. She raised her pulse shiv, but then a sound, not loud, just a tiny clink of metal, a drop tool, or maybe a failing capacitor. But it was enough. Marek turned, their eyes locked for a single, suspended moment. Kael didn't hesitate. She surged forward, but he was already reaching for an alarm. Sora acted first. A stun bolt sizzled through the air, striking the control panel and shorting it out. Sparks rained down as the lights flickered violently. Kael reached Marek, grabbed his collar, and slammed him against the console. Override your security. Now, she demanded. He sneered through bloodied lips. You think this changes anything? You're just another rebel. Another failure. She twisted his wrist until he cried out, Override, or I start slicing nerve clusters. He hesitated but complied. Seconds later, the system unlocked. Kael downloaded the entire data cache. Names, deployment maps, drone paths, hidden surveillance logs. Everything. Alarms erupted. Too late. Go! Kael shouted. They sprinted for the exit. The first patrol was already there, but Kael tossed an EMP flare, blinding their optics. She and Sora barreled to the disoriented guards, diving into the back tunnel. The walls shuddered from distant concussive blasts as backup units arrived. The escape was brutal. Tight corners, collapsing floors, rising steam, but they made it back into the old grid breathless and soaked. In the dim safety of the tunnel, Sora leaned against the wall, panting. That was insane. Kael looked at the data drive, still pulsing with stolen light. It was necessary. Sora wiped rain from her eyes. You didn't kill him. I wanted to, but I needed this more. Kael pocketed the drive. People will come after you now. Harder than before. They already were. Sora studied her, eyes filled with something like admiration, but also fear. You're not just a hacker or a ghost, are you? No. You used to be one of them. Kael didn't answer. She turned away, back toward the depths of the tunnel. She could already hear the storm receding, the silence folding in behind them. But ahead, everything was changing. With the data she now held, the balance of power could tilt. She knew the routes they used to deliver mechs, the times they dropped their guard. She knew the names of collaborators hiding in the sectors. She knew where the city bled. But knowledge brought danger. The people whose lives were logged in that drive would need protection, and the system, once wounded, would strike back with surgical fury. Kael didn't care. She hadn't lived this long by playing safe. Behind her, Sora asked, "What now?" Kael glanced back, eyes steeled. "Now we make sure the world remembers a name they tried to erase." Sora stepped forward. "And if we fail?" Kael gave the faintest smile. "Then we make it hurt." Smoke spiraled to a fractured skyline as dusk bled into the city, casting it in burnt orange and ash gray. The control spires once gleaming above Sector for now stood crippled, skeletal frames backlit by distant fires. Kael crouched in the wreckage of a collapsed magrail station, her fingers stained with carbon and blood. Around her, the world she had always tried to avoid unraveling in slow motion. The op had gone wrong. Too many variables, not enough time. The data Kael had stolen revealed more than she could have imagined. Not just patrol grids and supply caches, but a hidden black site deep beneath the spire. It wasn't surveillance. It was experimentation. People were being tested. Resistance fighters, citizens, children. Spliced with machine code, their minds overwritten. Turned into living weapons. And she had been one of the prototypes. The revelation hadn't broken her. It had clarified everything. The training accident that killed Torin. The memory fractures. Her uncanny interface with military hardware. It had all been orchestrated. She wasn't just a threat to the system. She was a piece of it, carved out and discarded when she became too unpredictable. Sora sat nearby, her side grazed, breathing shallow but steady. The girl had taken a shot meant for Kael, and still managed to drag her out of the fire zone before the detonations collapsed the spire's sidewall. "We can't stay here," Sora said quietly, her voice hoarse. "They'll sweep this sector within the hour." Kael nodded, her eyes locked on the broken lens of a nearby surveillance drone. "They're not looking to capture anymore." "You think they know?" "They know enough." Kael stood, the drive secured against her chest, now cracked but still functioning. The last fragments of data had revealed Marek's final protocol, an override designed to reactivate any dormant implants in escaped test subjects. She could feel the faint heat at the base of her skull, the tingling whispers of code pressing against her thoughts. It hadn't activated. Not yet. Sora tried to stand and staggered. Kael caught her and helped her up. The girl's weight felt heavier than it should. Too much blood lost. But there was no time to rest. They moved through the skeletal remains of the Magrail terminal, climbing over scorched cables and shattered glass. Kael's visor flickered with interference. The whole network was scrambling to adapt, recalibrating mechs to act without central command. The system was starting to panic. Outside, the streets had turned into battlegrounds. Resistance cells emboldened by Kael's actions struck simultaneously across multiple sectors. Explosions lit the night like fireflies. But there was no unity, only chaos. Without leadership, without direction, they would burn themselves out before morning. Kael didn't want to lead, but she was running out of choices. They reached the edge of a tunnel entrance hidden beneath a crumbling access road. From there, They could get to Canal District, where the last functioning Resistance broadcast node still operated. If she could transmit what remained of the drive, expose the Black Site project to the outer colonies, the corporations would be forced to respond. External pressure, embarrassment, maybe even revolt. But it wouldn't be enough. "You're bleeding," Sora said suddenly. Kael looked down. Her arm had been sliced by shrapnel, a deep laceration she hadn't even noticed. Her nerves were still too conditioned, her pain responses dull from old programming. "It's nothing," she said. Sora gave a weak smirk. "You always say that. One day it's going to be something." They descended into the tunnel. The darkness there was comforting, familiar, but they weren't alone. Halfway through, Kael sensed it, the rhythmic vibration of heavy footsteps, the subtle shift in airflow. Not patrol units. Something worse. The Enforcer-class mech appeared from the shadows ahead, its shell glistening with polymer armor, eyes glowing cold blue. But this one was different, sleeker, more responsive, a prototype. Kael pushed Sora behind a pillar. "Stay down." The mech scanned the tunnel and stepped forward. Its voice crackled from an external speaker, neutral, artificial. "Unit 2179, designation Kael. Present. Directive. Extraction or termination." Her heart thudded once hard. They had activated the protocol. She pulled her pulse shiv and set it to overload. She wouldn't let it take her alive. But her hand trembled. The implants in her spine flared, gentle at first, then insistent. A command trying to override her intent. The mech lunged. Kael dodged, just barely. Sparks erupted as its claws tore into the ferrocrete wall behind her. She rolled, slashed, struck its leg servos. It staggered but recovered instantly. Another blow sent her crashing into the opposite wall. Her vision blurred. Blood filled her mouth. Then Sora screamed. The girl had pulled herself upright, clutching a makeshift explosive. "No!" Kael shouted, but Sora threw the charge. The tunnel lit up with a blinding blast. The mech reeled, shielding its core. Kael launched herself forward in the distraction, stabbing her shiv into an exposed chest plate and sending the full pulse charge through its neural core. The mech spasmed, then collapsed. Silence. Smoke. Kael crawled to Sora. The girl was pale, too pale, her lips cracked and breath-thin. "Hey!" Kael said softly. "Stay with me?" Sora blinked slowly. "You need to go. Send it. You're the only one who can. You're not dying here." Sora gave the faintest shake of her head. "You're more than what they made you." Kael's throat tightened. She carried Sora the rest of the way to the broadcast station. Through fire, through silence, through the memory of all she had lost. The station was buried beneath an old water treatment plant, shielded from external scans. She accessed the console, inserted the crack drive, and began the upload. Images flashed, documents, video, names. Marek's voice. Screams. Experiment logs. The truth. Kael watched as the signal jumped through secure networks, bounced off deep space relays, and burst out of the city's boundaries. Across colonies, across controlled zones, across the eyes of millions. Then the screen went dark. For a moment, she stood still, listening, waiting. Outside, alarms changed tone. The city's heartbeat skipped. Change had begun. And Kael, the weak girl no one noticed, the ghost they tried to erase, stood at the center of it all. She turned to Sora, who lay wrapped in blankets beside the station's core, still breathing, barely. "We're not done," Kael whispered. "We're just getting started."